When Vince McMahon figuratively handed the keys of Raw and SmackDown to Eric Bischoff and Paul Heyman, a small part of me felt that a huge change was in store. Bischoff and Heyman's reputation spoke for themselves. Sure, they ran into roadblocks eventually. Heyman's came from a financial place and Bischoff's was creatively, but their positive runs easily overshadow their dark times. Heyman's history as a booker in WWE can be traced back to the early 2000s where he ran SmackDown. SmackDown beforehand was in consideration to be cancelled, and he came in. He brought the ratings up with some compelling television. You want wrestling? The show has it. Entertainment? The show has it. SmackDown for the 8-month time period he took over is often seen as the best run the show ever had. So what did he have to offer in 2019? Of course, it wasn't going to be as loose as it was in the past. McMahon in 2019 was totally different to his 2003 self. The first show brought a great sign of change. You easily felt what was different with the announcers cussing, Braun Strowman and Bobby Lashley going through the LED set, and of course, a Kanellis family drama. I mean, that alone, the whole cuck thing was a sign that Paul Heyman was running the show. The reception from fans was a bit positive. It felt like change was on the horizon. Heyman's Raw didn't have his identity throughout the summer yet. There was a bit here and there, but still felt like the show we were used to earlier with just some changes. The draft was when things started changing, in particular the season premiere of Raw. The emphasis on Heyman's Raw was booking young talent and making something out of them. Humberto Carrillo was brought up and was considered a possible star. One, he was a Latino that could bring the company more interest from that market. He had some talent. And he had a little push initially, and some actually thought he'd win the US title, but the push was gone after a couple of months. Unlike him, Buddy Murphy and Aleister Black had something interesting going on. These two were probably the guys Heyman was high on most, especially Black. Buddy Murphy had made a bit of a name for himself earlier that year on SmackDown. He had this awesome match with Roman Reigns that exposed him to the audience as someone with a good future. His run on Raw seemed optimistic because he was the first man to knock on Black's door. This led to an amazing set of matches between the two that a bunch of us thought elevated both men. Their TLC match was very aggressive and intriguing, and it's really a gem from Paul Heyman's SmackDown. Aleister Black seemed like somebody they were high on, and rumors even circulated that he was one of two choices to win the Royal Rumble. Of course, the other choice, Drew McIntyre, won, but still though, it really looked like Black was on the cusp of something. Buddy, of course, joined Seth Rollins, which I'm gonna get to soon. But yeah, Paul Heyman was pushing for the young guys. Ricochet was doing some stuff battling some of Raw's best, such as AJ Styles, Randy Orton, and Drew McIntyre. It wasn't pushed hard or anything like that, but there was a place for him. Andrade, though, was one of the most noticeable young guys getting pushed. He was doing something on SmackDown, but after his move to Raw, the emphasis was heavily placed on him. He captured the US title, brought Angel Garza to the main roster, and had a firm place on the card. Then he gets the wellness policy violation, and his run slowly faded. As a matter of fact, he lost the title to Apollo Crews, who I honestly forgot even had a title reign to begin with. Young talent was pretty eager to do something during the Heyman era and brought some freshness to the show. It didn't last long for most except somebody like Apollo Crews, who had a great transition into a rich Nigerian. Some of these guys fell out of favor or just left like Andrade. Heyman assured everyone that it was going to take a while to build these guys, maybe even 2 years, but after the pandemic, it didn't materialize. That's why it was removed from creative in June. They're like, time for us to do what we know. It meant Vince and co wanted to see results. In such a time of uncertainty, it wasn't going to last long. The tag team division was it. It's not really that memorable. The Viking Raiders, the OC, Rollins and Murphy, and the Street Profits. There was some good matches to come from it, but ultimately it's not something I thought was good or even memorable. All I remember is Messiah Rollins with a tag team title and the Street Profits playing a bunch of games with the Viking Raiders. Other than that, not much. The women's division had some interesting storylines. Asuka, who was in limbo for a bit, was brought back to the forefront with a heel turn. She wasn't even doing bad previously, but now she was much better. Asuka with Kairi Sane as the Kabuki Warriors feuded with the likes of Becky Lynch, Charlotte. Great matches all around, and this momentum ended up bringing her the women's title after she won Money in the Bank. Because, as you guys know, Becky announced she was pregnant, she handed the title to her. And from there, she held the division on lockdown from Raw's side single-handedly. Asuka was easily the workhorse and the most outstanding women's wrestler on Raw. Charlotte and other places went down to NXT to challenge Rhea Ripley for the title. Of course, this was a way of legitimizing NXT. I mean, it's a big deal if someone wins the Royal Rumble and chooses the NXT title. I thought it was a decent story, but then Charlotte went at WrestleMania, and I thought it was it. It does make sense though, I'm not going to say, oh, it doesn't make sense, because it really does. You're going to have Charlotte, the biggest or the second biggest women's wrestler in the WWE, on NXT. We're not complaining. By the time the Heyman era ended, Charlotte went on hiatus. As for the main face of the division, Becky Lynch, I remember some fans started turning on her. She was winning all these matches. She had a long title reign, and that's usually the recipe for disaster. Once again, not many fans turned. I'm not trying to control the narrative here and say, oh, these fans turn on her, all this and that. No one likes her. No. A bunch of people still liked her. It's just some of the fans on the internet. You know, it was growing with each victory, and by the time WrestleMania came, I thought Shayna Steele was going to win the title. I thought her destroying everyone in the chamber was going to culminate in championship gold, but it wasn't to be. For Becky, it was time to start a family. She was sorely missed on Raw for sure. At one point, they were going to have Charlotte face Lacey Evans at WrestleMania for the title. In what world does that sound enticing? But yeah, Becky had some great matches with Sasha, Asuka, but the title reign unfortunately didn't have a grand ending. It did leave things a bit open though. Now, the most interesting stuff from Heyman's Raw wasn't cuck stuff, guys getting cheated on, or the 24/7 scene, which had its moment. It was the top. The main event scene. AJ Styles with a great heel turn. Rey Mysterio with the US title. Seth Rollins is a heel turn. All kinds of things. So let's talk. AJ Styles post WrestleMania discovered a new edge. He turned heel and reformed the club, but this time they were straight out of Orange County. They were called the OC. Why would they call him that? I don't know. AJ Styles probably likes the show. But anyways, Styles as a heel was fresh. It was the same way he found a lot of momentum in 2016. Styles' matches were exceptional. Ricochet, Cedric, Rey Mysterio, great matches all around, and him being US champion was the move. It was the right move at the time, and it added prestige and credibility to the title, so when Rey won it back in November, it was a nice moment. Then he went on to feud with The Undertaker, which is almost insane. The fact that you had the franchise of TNA, Impact Wrestling, the best wrestler that they had probably, facing the measuring stick of WWE, the guy that had been around for over 20 years, at WrestleMania? It didn't have a crazy feeling at the time because AJ was around in WWE for a bit, but looking at the big picture, it's incredible. They had this awesome cinematic match that brought closure to The Undertaker's illustrious career and gave AJ Styles the WrestleMania main events. Styles wasn't on some amazing run, but he was continuing his great form from the past few years. Another TNA alumni, Samoa Joe, it seemed like there was something good that was going on for him. He had this face turn that made me believe big things were in store, possibly a full feud with Seth Rollins, but then he got injured and suspended before finding himself back on commentary. Brock Lesnar as champion brought a very fun storyline with Rey Mysterio. He gave Dominic a whooping that was deserved. I think Brock's on to the future here. And I love their match at Survivor Series. It's not a match that people mention a lot because, you know, it's not outstanding or anything like that, but Brock's selling made you believe for a moment that Rey could win the title again. It was a really great performance from Brock. He was really on something at this point. Royal Rumble, another one. He's out there throwing random wrestlers over the top rope and having fun while doing it. And then, of course, he made Drew McIntyre look like $1,000,000 on multiple occasions at the Rumble, on Raw, WrestleMania, before going away. It was a great short run for Brock, and going away, he was once again missed. He has this star element to him, whether you like him or not. Brock Lesnar, he's the box office draw. He's the big guy out there. Sorry, Ryback. He's the draw. He's the guy that everyone wants to watch. Kevin Owens is no stranger to the main event scene. He's always up there or a moment away from feuding with somebody from the top. His Raw run here made me believe big things were in store. Owens had already shown his potential as a babyface in his feud with Shane McMahon, and the feud with Seth Rollins brought him a lot of momentum, especially after the match at WrestleMania 36. But once again, this was around the time the pandemic started, so Owens didn't really do much. He was away. And if the crowds are around, though, who knows what would have been in this run. That said, it was still good to see him go through Seth Rollins, destroy him at WrestleMania. Looking back, there's a reason I prefer face Owens over heel Owens. That's a story for another day, though. Owens playing a part in exposing Seth Rollins meant everyone would see who the architect truly was. Heading into 2019, Rollins was probably the most over wrestler in WWE. He wins the title at WrestleMania, but from here, it was downhill. Fans turned on him for a couple of reasons. The booking, his character was a bit of a wimp, but in-ring Rollins backed it up, and at SummerSlam, he won the fans over again. Only to feud with the Fiend Bray Wyatt. The conclusion of Hell in a Cell brought Rollins' career at a crossroads. Remain a face and continued getting jeered, hated on by everyone, or turn it into a positive and turn heel. Enter the Messiah. Rollins thought that he had lost the fans due to them becoming unloyal. Rollins believed that his way was the right way and said that it was for the greater good. He brought in the AOP, Buddy Murphy, and he was back. Rollins' character work was excellent. He had some great matches with Kevin Owens and Drew McIntyre, and then by the time Heyman's Raw ended, he went after Rey Mysterio and Aleister Black's eyes. It was crazy stuff, but for Rollins, it was a return to form. He had a bad run up to Hell in a Cell, and they righted the ship, and so now he's one of the most over wrestlers in WWE. Vince McMahon and co had huge plans for Drew McIntyre upon his debut on the main roster in 2018. He was this vicious heel who would stop at nothing to beat his opponent. McIntyre on the main roster had lost only a handful of times, and after he returned from an injury in October, he was building momentum. McIntyre right at the beginning of the year seemed like a choice to win the Royal Rumble. His character was slowly transitioning from angry heel to casual face with an edge. McIntyre's moment at the Royal Rumble was very special. He dropped Brock Lesnar and eliminated him before winning the Royal Rumble itself. Like at the time, I was hoping he'd eliminate Lesnar. I didn't even expect him to eliminate Roman as well and win it. And with that, he was a made man. Brock Lesnar sold his ass off for him in the build to WrestleMania and made him look like a huge threat. And their match happened under odd circumstances, but Drew won the title in the main event of WrestleMania. Nobody was as hot as he was at the time. It's going to be overlooked now, but at the time, there's no denying that Drew was number one. The only guys that beat Brock in recent years were Goldberg, Roman, and Rollins. He's added to that elite list. McIntyre's time on top came at an unfortunate moment, but there's no denying that it was huge for his career. Before I go on to the final thing, let's just talk about this randomness. You guys remember back in the pandemic era where they brought in some random NXT wrestlers, Shane Thorne? It was just some bizarre stuff. Then you'd be seeing some guys like Austin Theory who actually wrestled at WrestleMania. It's crazy to think about. This time period, it's almost like it never happened. The fact that Austin Theory was in a WrestleMania match despite appearing on the main roster for only like 2 weeks is crazy. Not only that, the fans in the crowd were NXT wrestlers. It was weird. And lastly, this feud. When Randy Orton was drafted to Raw in 2019, I honestly didn't think this match would become a reality. So Orton comes in, feuds with AJ Styles, and at one point, he teased retirement. It was a very convincing promo, and then Edge returned. He needed a safe opponent, but in storyline though, Randy Orton resorted to his legend killer character and brought a level of depth and violence that wasn't seen in years. Because there was no crowds, the promos felt deeper. The match at WrestleMania was pretty damn long, but they made up for it with the match at Backlash. They did the most trying to sell you on the match. Oh, it's the greatest match of all time. Why would you say that? I don't know. You take that away though, it's a great match. It coincided with Paul Heyman's exit from creative, but overall, Edge and Orton was very different from the storylines we saw in WWE at the time. It easily stands out because Edge was back and it was his first feud, and two, you can feel the emotion behind it. These guys are really going all out from the character department to draw you into this feud. Randy Orton went on to have an amazing summer that concluded with him capturing the WWE Championship. It was a great one. Overall, Paul Heyman's time on Raw, in my opinion, was mixed. I feel a lot of people overrate it. They say, oh, it was great, but then you see Rowan with a spider and it's like, really? It also didn't help that they had cuck storylines, but at the same time, you can't say that Heyman did everything in his power. We don't really know how much power he had at the time. I just assumed the cuck storylines came from him because he did them in the past. He helped book the younger guys like Aleister Black, Buddy Murphy, Andrade, and it was all about the young talent, so it kind of balances out. One thing for sure though is that this version of Raw was better than the previous one. There was some problems, but easily better than the previous one. Raw of 2018 and 19 is very depressing. Whenever I think about it, it's a gloomy thought. You guys have heard me on the live streams trash 2018 Raw because of how bad it was. And I don't really want to talk about it at the moment. We're here to talk about 2020 Paul Heyman Raw. I mean, the fact that he brought in MVP instantly makes it better than whatever they had in the previous version of Raw. I thought this version of Raw was decent. It's not great or anything like that. I do feel some people overrate it. But on the other side of things, it's cool that Paul Heyman was pushing young talent. He was doing this and that. All for the greater good, as Seth Rollins would say. His vision of the product wasn't going to become a reality because Vince wasn't patient, as you guys heard me mention earlier. They ended the whole thing in June of 2020, a full 11 months, although it's technically 9 if you start from the draft. And I think it's a shame we never got to see how it truly would have been if Paul Heyman was at the helm. It's kind of unfortunate, but it is what it is. Alright, what do you guys think of Paul Heyman's Raw? Please comment down below, and that's the first video. Make sure you hit the Styles Clash on the like button and perhaps the spear on the subscribe button. Peace, I'm out.